Well, guys, it's 5:02 by my clock here, and looks like all of you are on Zoom today, and that's okay. Understood. Oh, Mackenzie's here too. Good. So I've been getting some questions about the PowerPoint, and so I thought I'd start with that. And this is the prompt, this is the page, and I got a lot of stuff on there, but the first thing I want to point out is that I want you to email your narrated PowerPoint when it's finished. I'm not sure the storage space on Canvas would handle all of your narrated PowerPoints because the files get really pretty big when you start adding narration audio to the program. So anyway, that's the first thing. The other thing is that before 11:59 p.m. April 17th. So that kind of gets me to another question, because I only have 5 quiz 5s submitted. What is 12 p.m.? That's noon. 11:59 is 1 minute before midnight, but at midnight that turns into 12 a.m. 12:01 a.m. and so on. That's the meridian. That's the place where it crosses over. And so anyway, if you don't have quiz 5 in, please get it in. And so back to the narrated PowerPoint presentation. One of the big questions I've been getting is, what subject should I write on? And so this is one of the PowerPoint instructions I have on the prompt, and I have it to develop research skills. This is the purpose of all of this, and I do want to see some knowledge and comprehension, because that's really what that's the whole point of all of this entire class. And then specification, 7 to 10 minutes. I need your bibliography, and give me a Word doc or a PDF transcript, and you can submit that on Canvas. That's not a big file. And so the other thing, here it is. This is a question I'm getting a lot. What can I
add
write
something about the transcript for a second?
Yes, of course.
So the transcript that's supposed to be on a Word document, that's just like everything we said in the narration?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly it. And it doesn't have to be, your bibliography should be on there at the end of it too, but that's going to be on your PowerPoint. Everything you say, and you can do that, like have a title heading, slide 1. And then all of the things you say, hi, my name's David Smith. I'm a famous sculptor. You could look it up in the book. I make these stainless steel things, and I must be over 100 years old now, but you know, just say it. And so anyway, painting, sculpture, architecture after 1400 in the textbook. And so that's what I've been trying to direct you guys to, those of you who have asked me about this. Stick to the textbook. And as usual, give me the illustration number, chapter 31, illustration 5, which is shortened to 31.5. And so these are the issues I want you to cover, and this is all really cultural context issues. Formal analysis, and I got a link to this, and that is issues of shape, color, line, space, style, etc. And that's all kind of self-explanatory. And I really expect you to kind of incorporate that in your narration. And then finally, legacy. I'm going to talk a little bit about legacy when I show you today's PowerPoint, but that's kind of it. And so this is the assignment. I got formal analysis and power structures. That's a similar kind of PowerPoint. You don't know what I'm talking about, take a look at this. And there's that formal analysis hot link. And I got the examples here from other classes and how to save these as MPEGs, MPEG-4 videos, etc. There's another example. And you are having trouble doing a narrated PowerPoint. This is the actual Microsoft Office record a slideshow with narration and slide timings video that'll help you get through that. And so, any other questions? I want to make sure you guys, this will be the last time I see you before they're due. Okay. Well, let's see. Share screen. No, that won't work. And view slideshow from current slide. Now I got to make sure I got you guys. Yep, we're on the same page. So, quiz 5, narrated PowerPoint. And so this is kind of by design that a lot of the points for this course are backloaded. And it's really important to get these things done and get them in. I really want to give out a whole bunch of good grades. Help me out with that. And so I didn't really expect that so many of you guys would be on Zoom. So I'm taking it you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, David, I knew you could. How about the rest of you guys?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, Kaylee.
I can hear you.
Mackenzie, see, you're my regular. Jeff. How about Christina?
I can hear you.
All right, yeah, just like you were here. All right, well, good enough. So I want to talk to you a little bit about pop art, and I think I might cut it short tonight. the weather, and maybe give you guys a little more time to get this stuff done. Is that working for you?
Works for me.
Okay, because I could talk like a whole year on this stuff. I used to, when I was teaching at Truman State University, I taught a whole semester contemporary art. So I got some stories. But when we were here last, I told you about these guys, Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns, and how they were looking outwardly, not inwardly, for inspiration, for subject matter. And so this kind of caught on. And as I asked you guys in quiz 5 about why was the public hostile to abstract expressionism? They couldn't understand it. You needed a critic to explain it to you and stuff. Well, the public like really embraced pop art. Let me tell you, finally something we can get. It was huge. And a lot of people say that this is the beginning of postmodern. Postmodern simply means after modernism. And there's a lot of debate on when that actually starts. And some say it begins with pop art. Some people say it begins in the 1970s, 1980s, whatever. But anyway, we see a change. And this is it. This is pop art. And you have these two major figures, Roy Lichtenstein and this guy, Andy Warhol. And they kind of take this guy's idea of images gleaned from popular culture, everyday life. A lot of this stuff that's in this collage could have been cut and pasted from a stack of magazines back in 1956. This was just kind of the common stuff that was being circulated in popular culture. And so that's that outward looking kind of art. And so these guys, they kind of take that to heart. I'll show you a couple of, for instances here. Hamilton takes this cover of what they would call a dime store comic book novel kind of thing, pulp fiction sort of stuff, you know, cheap, not very intellectual, kind of common. And you see this is titled Young Romance. It was a comic book. It was a graphic novel. Today, graphic novels are actually scaled up much more than this, but this was kind of, you would buy it, it would be like a nickel or a dime. As a matter of fact, I think this one was 10 cents. Let's take a zoom in on that. 10 cents. Hey. Another thing I want you to see is this emblem right here. Ford. This was what you would get as your badge, your emblem on your brand new Ford, your Ford Crown Victoria, your Ford truck, whatever. That was the 50s logo, and car companies kind of did that in the 50s. Cadillac still does that. If you see the logo for Cadillac, it looks like a family crest of sorts. And that's kind of what this is. Another thing we got here is this ham, a canned ham, kind of benign. It's not haute cuisine, high brow food. It's kind of common, kind of everyday. It's kind of like this too, the Tootsie Pop, common everyday stuff. And so this is Hamilton. And then we get to this guy. I just showed you Hamilton's True Romance. Roy Lichtenstein builds a career on these dime store novels, but he paints them in, it scales them up. So this is 3/8 by 3/8. It's a perfect square, but you know, 3/8, that's 44 inches. That's kind of big. Bottom line, it's done with some fidelity to how those dime store pulp fiction works actually looked. If you take a look at this up close, you can see it's printed on newsprint, real cheap paper. But if you really zoomed in, and I can't do that here, you'll see that it's printed in a very economical and very cheap sort of way with little dots. We use dots today when we print, but typically not this crude. And so we got all of these dots. They're called Band-Aid dots. And this is what those comic books, if you will, and we saw True Romance, and that kind of gets to Lichtenstein, but there were a lot of other ones, the early Batman and Superman, and the early, all of the Stan Lee stuff was printed like this on newsprint. And so I'll show you, these are the dots, the Band-Aid dots. And of course, it's not over the whole thing. Some areas are painted in flat color, and it's got the thought bubble here. And this is like so true to its source. It's actually not changed much, except for it's done in oil and synthetic polymer paint, and it's done on a large scale. So, can anybody tell me why this would be considered art? Like, what's the big deal? Okay, it's not art. It's just some big hoax that the publisher of the textbook thought they'd try to pull one over on us. Now, okay, I'll tell you, some of the criticism, some of the support for this as art comes from these ideas. First of all, Leo Tolstoy, great Russian author, great Russian thinker, philosopher. He once said of art that the greatest art is the art that reaches the most people. Whoa, let's back this up. How many people are gonna understand this or that or this or that? Not many. And as a matter of fact, during the time these guys like Motherwell and these guys were painting Rothko and Pollock, there was somebody who had written that the audience for this kind of art was probably no larger than 10,000 people. And that's a lot of people, but when you consider the millions and today billions of people in the world, That's a really tiny fraction. And so Tolstoy said the greatest art reaches the greatest number of people. Well, people really understood this. And it's kind of campy. It's kind of nerdy. It's kind of in poor taste. But that's another thing these guys reacted against. The idea of taste and connoisseurship. Like, what's all of this stuff about? Why do you need to have a major in philosophy or an MFA from Yale to understand what these artists are doing? That's kind of highbrow. Kind of bring it down. Lowbrow, much more common. Second thing, there were people, critics, who kind of argued, and I think successfully, that in its own way, it does what art should be doing. And here you got this idea of hopelessness. That's the way it should have begun, but it's hopeless. You see the tears, you see the expression. It may not be highbrow, but you can relate to it. And in fact, that's why all of this stuff, Hamilton's Young Romance, Lichtenstein's Hopeless, that's why it looks like it does. So it could relate to all of these people. And there were people too, I might add. I gotta see who's all here. Okay, yeah, I thought maybe somebody, never mind. These dots, these Ben-Day dots, that was the printing process that they used for that kind of print on newsprint, dime store novels. Bottom line, people recognize, at least some highbrow people recognize, that in its own way, this is Georges Seurat come to the 20th century. Georges Seurat, the pointillist guys, the Dadaism, the Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. Whoa. He's actually using and exploiting some of the advances made in the late 19th century. And so anyway, this like really caught on and it got real trendy and it kind of covered a lot of ground in terms of artistic expression. It hit the galleries and museums in that high art category, but it also kind of found its way back into design, fashion, all kinds of things, even in a lot of films. See, if you know about this stuff, you'll look at movies from the 1960s and see stuff like this. And you go, Lichtenstein. Yes, of course. Of course, when you're an art nerd like me, you almost always look at artwork on TV commercials, in movies, on television programs, etc. But anyway, this is pop art and it was wildly popular. Lichtenstein and his contemporary, who became even more famous, Warhol, green Coca-Cola bottles. And basically what he did, he didn't try to recreate the Ben-Day dot matrix. He used a kind of process that was really only used in sign making. Screen print. Today, we look at screen print as a legitimate high art process and medium. Back then, it was commercial. It was seen as kind of the lowest of the low. It was kind of like those dime store novels in its own way. And so Warhol, and you see he's making Coca-Cola bottles. I'll go back to Hamilton. That is as benign and as common as this Hormel canned ham or this Tootsie Pop. It's regular, it's ordinary. There's nothing exceptional about this. And it's Coca-Cola bottles, probably the most ubiquitous, the most widespread brand of its day. Coca-Cola was one of the first corporations to actually have a brand that was worldwide. There are people that say that the United States helped win World War II, but they brought Coca-Cola with them because people in England, France, Africa, Asia, all over the place, Coca-Cola, people loved it. And this became global at a time when that was new. There weren't many global brands. Today, we see them all the time. You know, they got Starbucks in Shanghai, China. I was in China before, by the way. Guangzhou, I could go to Kentucky Fried Chicken in Guangzhou. They got Starbucks in Moscow. They got Hard Rock cafes all over the world. You know, things are global today. 1962, not so much. And it was theorized that that's what attracted Warhol to this. It was the most common, the least extraordinary subject matter that you could have, just like Hamilton, something very benign. And so layer this on there, if you take a look at how this is put together, you'll see that these silkscreen images, and if you've ever done silkscreen, you typically get like an image and you transfer it to this silk screen and it blocks out the ink and it lets ink through strategically. And so you have this screen, it's in a box, you pour ink in it, you lay it down and you pull a squeegee over the top. But look at this, like this one right here. That's like off, what we would call off registered. And the screen clogs up. And then just like if you were doing this for making signs, you got to take that screen and you got to clean it. You got to clean it really after every run. But bottom line is it shows a lot of the foibles, a lot of the shortcomings of this process, as well as being very benign, very common. And so as much as art was going highbrow, these guys brought it back down to earth. And so here's another Andy Warhol, Marilyn Diptych. And this side here, it's basically all of the screens are pretty well registered, and each color has a different screen. So you would likely do the yellow background first, and then the other yellow for the hair, the pink for the flesh, the red for the lips, the white, and so on. You would kind of figure this out. But it's all done in a pretty skillful way. And then he's got the other side, no color, a lot of off registration, a lot of clogged screen here. It's really kind of a mess, if you look at it that way. And so we say Marilyn Monroe. Well, she's not that common. Not like Coca-Cola bottles. Oh, thought I had another one here. He did Campbell soup cans too. Benign, common, ordinary. What's so artistic about a soup can? Well, the fact that it is so common. And so anyway, I got to Maryland here. Andy Warhol becomes wildly popular, and he stays wildly popular for a long time. He is like this guy that throws parties that everybody has to be at, celebrity parties, who's who of New York. He developed this place, his studio was called The Factory. And after a while, he had assistants actually putting these things together. He would tell them what to do. He'd put his name on it. And so people ask about that. Andy, did you have anything to do with it? And he said, yeah, I signed it. That made it mine. That raised a few eyebrows. Let me tell you. Rembrandt did that. Titian did that. Bernini did that. That's something that's kind of really as old as Western art. And so anyway, these guys are kind of digging up old theories and old ideas and bringing them into the 20th century. And so anyway, like I say, Warhol did a lot of things that were strictly benign, and the Coca-Cola bottles, the Campbell soup cans. But because he became wildly popular, he started doing portraits of famous people. And in fact, that was, if you were somebody, if you were a celebrity in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, he died in 86, I believe. Bottom line, you wanted to get your portrait done by Andy Warhol. So let me tell you something else. I just read just 2 days ago about a lawsuit, and it involves an Andy Warhol portrait of the entertainer, the rock star Prince. And the person who took the actual photograph that was subsequently used to create a silk screen that became an Andy Warhol portrait, the photographer is suing the estate of Andy Warhol for copyright violation, because she said, this is my photo that I took of Prince and he should not have used it. Well, what makes this all the more complicated, excuse me, is that portrait of Prince is like worth $10 million today or more. So anyway, Warhol becomes a celebrity. He even shows up in things like Saturday Night Live. If you look on YouTube, you can see that. He made movies, he did all kinds of stuff. He was like the artist of the 1960s, and I'm sure you guys have heard of it. More so than Richard Hamilton, and more so than Roy Lichtenstein, but you may have heard of them. And I have here a few other people. George Siegel, and he's a sculptor, and he creates these environments, and he makes these plaster people set up as real world environments. The gas station. Now this may look really, really strange to you guys. back in my day, when I was your age, this was kind of what a gas station was all about. Didn't have convenience stores, but they had a Coke machine. If you were thirsty, you'd put a nickel in the Coke machine and get yourself a bottle of Coke. Drink Coca-Cola in bottles. And see this rack here? That's where you put the Coca-Cola bottles. And maybe to some extent, this is kind of a statement on Andy Warhol. But the gas station would sell tires. Back, things were so bad in those days, they would sell used tires. So I don't think people really think about doing that anymore. But here's the tires. Here's cans of oil and some motor oil here. And that was in the days when you pull up to a gas station and some guy would come out, some guy like this would come out and ask you how much gas you wanted. Fill it up with regular. And they would wash your windshield, have a squeegee, wash your windshield. Can I check your oil, please? Because they wanted to sell you a quart of oil. Oh, let me check the tires. Full service gas stations don't exist anywhere anymore. Everything's changed. But that is kind of the interesting thing about pop art, is that they give us collectively a pretty good glimpse of what life was like 50, 60 years ago. And so George Siegel, pop art sculptor, rubber tiles, oil can, electric clock, you see. Another guy, James Rosenquist, another pop artist, but look at this. This is 10 feet high and 86 feet long. Detail of this, F-111, 1965. Anybody know what an F-111 is?
Nope.
All right, well, it's this thing right here. It's actually a fighter jet aircraft, Air Force, US Air Force. You can see little bits and pieces of it. And this is a hair dryer. Whoa, where did we see that before? Right there. Hair dryer and a little girl. These little blue-eyed, blonde-haired little girls, they were in every kind of advertising imaginable. They would sell hair dryers and sunshine, white bread, just all kinds of things, ivory soap, etc. Anyway, but this is kind of a collage of those same kind of images. They're not put together to create that space of a room that Richard Hamilton did. But see, Rosenquist went right from being a billboard painter to being a pop artist. And so he's got some of the same kinds of things. Some of this not recognizable, but a light bulb, for example. Angel food cake, the F-111, snow tires. That was kind of a new thing back then. Developing technology that you didn't have to stay home in a snowstorm. And so you put these tires on the rear of your car, because everything was rear wheel drive then, and you take them off in the spring and put your regular tires back on. Anyway, like I say, this is kind of gives you a pretty interesting picture of the 1960s. Now this guy, as you see, he was a billboard painter turned pop artist. Klaus Oldenburg, he's a sculptor, pop art sculptor, and he would create giant sculptures of benign objects. And this is kind of a different, little, not ordinary Oldenburg, 1969, reworked 1954, but he puts tank tracks on this. But the whole thing here, and it's got the ladder, you can climb up this thing. Lipstick. How many of you asked this genuinely? How many of you have ever been to Kansas City? I'm hearing nobody. If you go to Kansas City, you will see, hopefully you will see, the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, which is kind of the sister museum to the St. Louis Art Museum in Forest Park. Very similar kinds of museums. The Nelson, however, they commissioned Klaus Oldenburg, who is known for this large-scale sculpture of common, everyday, benign objects, to create sculpture for the Nelson. And he did. And it's been like 30 years ago. But how many of you know what a shuttlecock is?
I think I know about those or heard of them before.
Yeah, it's one of those words you hear, but and the sport they're generic to, or germane to, I should say, is badminton. And the badminton birdie is called a shuttlecock. And it's this thing, it's got a weight on one end, it's got feathers, and it's kind of like a easy kind of tennis. You hit the ball, you hit the shuttlecock back and forth across the net. So it kind of follows some of the same rules of tennis, that you use a racket, uses some of the same rules as volleyball, that you don't let it hit the ground, you see. Shuttlecock. Klaus Oldenburg made a bunch of gigantic, like 20 feet high, shuttlecocks that are on the grounds of the Nelson. Same idea. Common, everyday things blown up to gigantic proportions. Like this. And so this is kind of where some of this leads to. This is Audrey Flack, Maryland, 1977. And kind of what grows out of this pop art, that in the 70s, a lot of artists returned to creating those illusions that we saw over the first 400 years, 450 years of this course. All of the things that the Renaissance, the Baroque artists did. And what they did, they were called photorealists, but in their own way, they're actually much more realistic than photos, because a photograph only has one point of focus. Everything in front is slightly out of focus. Everything behind is out of focus. It's pretty much the nature of photography. You take something like Audrey Flack, and every bit of this canvas is superbly detailed. And so some of the same kind of subjects, the flowers that we saw in Baroque still lifes, the fresh fruit, the orange sliced in half, the peach, still wet, still, I mean, extremely fresh. And some of this stuff is just magnificent. A perfume bottle. You ever see these at a department store, or some of you may actually have some of this kind of stuff. Look at all of the reflection of all of the light, all of this stuff going on. Shiny black pearls in a blue glass cup. Photographs, printed words, all of this stuff in exquisite detail. And so out of pop art, you get a renewed realism, a fantastic realism, a realism that rivals what had been done for hundreds of years, probably surpasses that, because these artists have more tools to be able to create these illusions. But at any rate, and here's another one, instead of going to photorealism and stuff, I've talked more than I was going to, right? Like I said, I could keep going about this. Lastly, though, this is Chuck Close, and he's another one of those, quote, photorealists. And this is a big self-portrait, which is 9 feet tall, 7 feet wide. It is huge. And you can see all of the whiskers on his face, and it's done monochrome, or achromatic, I should say, because it looks like a black and white photo. And again, there's another guy who graduated from the MFA program at Yale University. But at any rate, he has the tools to be able to create a much more detailed illusion. So that comes back. And so I'll stop right there. Pop, photorealism. Any questions about the quiz 5? Or the narrated PowerPoint? Well, I think that means, oh, I got another person. Randis, you're here, good. I was just about to wrap this up. You got any questions about anything?
Oh no, I'm okay. I'm sorry I was late too.
That's all right. I'm good with that. And this will go up on the media gallery once I get this downloaded to
Oh, okay.
YouTube and converted to go on Canvas. So with that, I'll see you guys Monday. Have a good weekend. Stay dry. Be good. No, you guys are always good. See you then.
All right.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Thank you.